Ugh. This turtleneck is making me hot. It's too hot. I might have to take it off. Or is that just the NFC and AFC playoff picture heating up? We're going to discuss NFC, AFC playoff picture, the matchup this week that will decide both sides of the conferences, their playoff pictures. And then we will also discuss teams that have now been eliminated from the playoffs and teams that are about to get eliminated. All of that after this. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Camper Report. I am your host, Benjamin Camperman, and we've got a crazy video today. Check out my last live that I did and my last video that I made that I did with Steph Sanchez from 49K podcast. We were talking about Lamar Jackson, how to shut him down, so check that video out. But today, we are talking about the playoff picture, how the matchups this week will affect both the NFC and AFC playoff picture. And we are also talking about the teams that have been eliminated from the playoff picture, the teams that are about to get eliminated. So let's get all into it. Teams that are eliminated, I'm going to quickly do a rundown from them. Carolina Panthers, we obviously know them. The New England Patriots are eliminated. I do want to say I'm going to provide some of my notes for the New England Patriots. We'll see if Bill Belichick stays for the rebuild because it's obvious now the Patriots need to draft a quarterback. They need to rebuild. They're not a good team. And this next year, they're really going to plummet into a rebuild. So we'll see if Bill Belichick stays for that rebuild. And what he needs to get a good coordinator to develop a QB, because his last few, Josh McDaniels, his last one, Bill O'Brien, none of those guys too great at developing QBs. So if Bill Belichick does stay for the New England Patriots, I want to see him develop a quarterback and draft at least if he can't develop a quarterback, get a coordinator that maybe is good at working with quarterbacks. That's what I want to see with Bill Belichick next up. Next up, we've got the New York Jets. It's really hard to know what they're going to do. It might be that the New York Jets fire Robert Saleh. I don't know. But all I do know is they are eliminated. Aaron Rodgers is not coming back now because they're eliminated from the playoffs. They have no chance to make it. It was an unfortunate season filled with a ton of injuries. Their main concern going into this next offseason is addressing the offensive line, maybe getting another elite wide receiver. Not a ton of guys on there on that receiving core that really impress me, at least. And so their next kind of thing should be, should they go and get a wide receiver and obviously draft a offensive lineman there? Since they do have Aaron Rodgers, the question going forward should be, I mean, they have a high draft pick, so do they spend it on an elite talent outside of the quarterback position, like an offensive lineman or wide receiver, or do they draft Aaron Rodgers' replacement after this year? That could be something that the Jets could look into going forward. After that, we've got the Titans. They're eliminated, but they have a promising future quarterback. A promising draft pick in Will Levis that they drafted last year. My only question with them is, do they fire Mike Vrabel? Their offense has not been great for a while now. They haven't really been great for a few years. So is it time to move on from Mike Vrabel this offseason and maybe go to more of an innovative, offensive-minded coach after this season ends? That's a question that I think the Titans have to ask themselves is Mike Vrabel really the coach for them going forward? But hey, at least they have a quarterback in Will Levis that they know that they can win with. The Cardinals are next up. I don't have a lot to say on them. I think the problem with Kyler Murray is he gets injured too much. So now the Cardinals have a tough question to answer. Do they stick with Kyler Murray or do they draft the replacement for Kyler Murray with their top 5 pick in the NFL draft? That should be a huge question that I think, if you want a reliable quarterback, you go to the draft. Kyler Murray has a lot of talent, but the problem with him is that he can't stay healthy. He gets injured a lot. So that's something that Jonathan Gannon has to answer. Now, as far as coaching wise, I think Jonathan Gannon is the guy for the Cardinals. I mean, his team didn't win a lot this year, but they were in a lot of close games and they showed a lot of heart. So I think he should be the coach to lead them deeper into this rebuild and get that new uh, quarterback. Next up, so those are kind of the teams that are eliminated. The teams that are close to eliminated, I've got about one, or let's see if I've got two. Yeah, teams that are the one team that I'm kind of looking at is Chargers. They're close to being eliminated, and the biggest problem with they're probably not going to make the playoffs. The biggest problem with the Chargers is they're kind of in a little bit of a dilemma because they obviously fired Brandon Staley. They have aging stars. And so it's going to be hard for them to kind of rebuild a new team because they have aging stars they can't really cut because they guaranteed a lot of money to. So they have a lot of aging stars, a lot of guys that they're going to have to make hard decisions. Do we trade these guys? Do they cut these guys? My kind of um my biggest suggestion to them and to the new head coach that is going to be their head coach later on in this offseason, my biggest suggestion to their new head coach coming in is trade one of those players, you know, trade Keenan Allen, trade Austin Eckler, get some pick compensation and replace them with a a new star that can maybe help your team a little bit. So that's going to be tricky for them to kind of find out. Um, it's going to be tricky for them to, how do I put this? It's going to be tricky for them to know what to do with all these aging stars that aren't necessarily, they don't want to necessarily go through a new rebuild. They want to win a Super Bowl because these are a bunch of veterans. So we'll see what happens with them. That should be very interesting. So now let's talk about the very much alive teams in the playoff hunt. Um, Texans, Colts, and the biggest thing with these two teams is they're both tied, and they're also tied with they're both 8-6. They're both tied with the Jaguars. And the biggest thing is Texans and Colts play the last week. So that game, Texans versus Colts, is setting up to be a incredible game where both teams could be playing in that last week of the season, could be playing for a playoff spot or even the division. We'll see how things go there. Other teams fighting. Rams are at 7-7 in the NFC. Seahawks are at 7-7 in the NFC. Packers are at 6-8 in the NFC. Falcons are at 6-8 in the NFC. Saints are at 7-7 in the NFC. Vikings are at 7-7. So the NFC, it's kind of weird because it's like the AFC is a little bit more concise. It's still a huge battle, but the NFC is like, it's a battle between not very good teams for those last few wild card spots. So it's like they're not necessarily good, but they all have a mediocre record, and so they're kind of going to be battling it out these next few weeks. And let's get into kind of some of the matchups that will affect the playoffs this next week in week 16. So we got Browns versus Titans. Now, sorry, Browns versus Texans. Texans on the outside looking in, they're 8th seed right now, so just outside the playoff picture. Browns are 5th seed, 9-5. So if the Texans beat the Browns, they have a tiebreaker over the Browns, and the Browns potentially drop outside of the playoffs. So that's a big matchup. Texans are also playing with Case Keenum in this game. No CJ Stroud. Browns are playing with Joe Flacco. So it's kind of a battle of the backup quarterbacks. Jaguars versus Buccaneers. Not only do the Buccaneers have to win because they are in the playoff picture fighting in the AFC South, but NFC South, but the Jaguars they're tied with the Texans and Colts. So any loss that the Jaguars have could mean that they slip out of the leading team in the AFC South. So Jaguars is a big team. Raiders versus Colts. Really, anyone in the AFC South, it's a huge game this week. So that means Raiders versus Colts. Jaguars versus Buccaneers, Browns versus Texans. Anyone that is in the AFC South are going to be fighting for their lives this week, not only to hopefully claim a title, a division title, but as well as a spot in the wild card. Ravens versus 49ers, another huge game this week. Ravens, they cannot lose, because if they lose, they could potentially lose the 1 seed to the Dolphins. Dolphins, outside looking in, they're 1 game behind. And if the Dolphins win out, so here's a weird scenario for you guys. If the Dolphins win out, they'll be the 1 seed. Dolphins play the Ravens the second last week in week 17. So that would be next week. They play the Ravens next week. So potentially whoever wins that matchup next week could be the number 1 seed. So that's another big matchup. Ravens need to beat the 49ers in this one to stay atop of the AFC at the number 1 seed. My guess is the Ravens get it because of their schedule, which I can pop up now. So as you see here, here is the schedule. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this too well, but I'm going to try to get it onto a different layout here. And hopefully we'll be able to get it a little bit better. Okay. So you guys can probably see this a little bit better now, but the Miami Dolphins, their remaining schedule is versus Cowboys, at Ravens, and versus Bills. So that's a hard remaining schedule for the Dolphins. The Baltimore Ravens, on the other hand, have 49ers, Dolphins, and Steelers. So both schedules very hard, but not, I would consider maybe the Ravens get it. I think the Ravens are just a better team than the Dolphins, and I think the Ravens end up actually getting that 1 seed. Now, we're going back to, so that's kind of a major thing to watch as far as the 1 seed goes, but there could be a major shakeup as far as, let me get back to a single screen here. There could be a major shakeup as far as the wild card goes. You've got the Browns, the Bengals, Texans, Jags, Colts, and Bills all fighting for a huge spot in the playoffs. And then the matchup, arguably of the week, Bengals versus Steelers. Steelers are 7-7, Bengals 8-6. So that's kind of the breakdown of the AFC. We've got, Browns, Bengals, Texans, Jags, Colts, Bills, all in that wild card spot, all vying for wild card and divisional crown spots, whatever you call it. And those are kind of some of the matchups in the AFC. Now let's flip over to the NFC. All of the NFC West games, out of all of them, the ones to watch are who the Seahawks play and who the Rams play. Seahawks play Titans. I expect them to win. The Rams play Saints. I expect them to win as well. So, Saints and the Rams play Saints. Both of them, Saints and Rams, are both tied at 7-7, and both are close to making the playoffs. So that's another matchup to look for, is Rams versus Saints. That kind of that's tomorrow. That's a huge tie-breaking matchup. So watch for that game. Packers are in there as well, believe it or not. Their remaining schedule: Panthers, Vikings, Bears. Saints remaining schedule: Rams, Buccaneers, Falcons. So I don't know. I think I could go back to the screen right here and kind of go to the NFC playoff picture and see really which one, because schedules are really the biggest thing with all of this, is who has the schedule that is the most favorable. And so let's go look at the schedule here. Minnesota Vikings have Lions twice and Packers once. So they end off with 3 divisional matchups. The Los Angeles Rams have Saints, Giants, and 49ers the last 3 games. The Seahawks have Titans, Steelers, and Cardinals the last 3 games. The New Orleans Saints have Rams, Buccaneers, and Falcons the last 3 games. I apologize, guys, for the ads here, because I'm just on this CBS site, and there might be some ads that pop up. But anyways, the Atlanta Falcons, Colts, Bears, and Saints the last 3 games. Packers, Panthers. The Packers have Panthers, Vikings, and Bears the last 3 games, and those are kind of the teams all vying for it. If if I had to guess with those kind of card games, I'd have to probably predict that the Seahawks, Rams, and I want to say Seahawks, Rams, and I mean, as far as just off of strength of schedule, it's going to be Seahawks, Rams, and probably the Vikings. Well, I take that back. I would guess out of all strength of schedule, it's going to be Seahawks, Rams, and Packers if they can play well enough. But other than that, I think it would possibly be the Vikings as well. Um, I just I think Rams are playing. They're one of the hottest teams in my opinion in the NFL right now. So I think the Rams are just they're not a ton of teams right now are better than them in the NFC. And then the Seahawks just beat the Eagles. They have a pretty favorable schedule going forward. So I think it's going to be probably somewhere between it's going to be Rams and Seahawks and then Eagles or Cowboys as that third wild card spot. Forgive me before I forgot that the Eagles were in there. So the final 2 spots, we know that the Cowboys and Eagles are going to make it. The final 2 spots have to be Rams and Seahawks. Just the way that those 2 teams are playing, the way that the NFL is going right now, their 2 remaining schedules, it has to be Rams and Seahawks. Otherwise, I'd pick the Packers to go in there as well if those 2 teams do not make it. Cowboys versus Dolphins fighting for the number 1 seed, and Cowboys kind of looking to keep the division. You know, they're tied with the Eagles. They own the tiebreaker. And, that's a huge game to watch for because both teams, Dolphins and Cowboys, both teams fighting for a lot. Lions versus Vikings. The Vikings fighting for, that wild card spot, as I had said before, and Lions are fighting kind of for the 2 seed. They're fighting maybe even for the 1 seed if everything goes their way. And they also play the Cowboys next week. So whoever wins that Cowboys game next week is going to potentially even get the 2 seed. So Lions really key that they win this game versus the Vikings, not only for, you know, playoff divisional implications, but also just because they need to stay afloat for that number 2 seed. And again, if they beat the Vikings both times, then I believe they would be 5-1 in the division for the whole year. So it's also key that they get that for tie-breaking reasons. They need to get a good record in their division for tie-breaking reasons. So that's the whole spiel here. That's kind of what I got into. This was a little bit more of a live scenario. So apologize if sometimes during the whole video, I was trying to, look for different teams, look for schedules. But I think hopefully you guys got a lot out of this video. And that's kind of the whole playoff picture explained. I think it's pretty clear who makes the NFC playoff picture. I think Rams and Seahawks deserve to make it. And that's just how I view it. In the AFC, it's a little bit more complicated because you have Steelers, Bengals. I don't think the Steelers make it. If I had to guess, I it's so tough. I think it would be Texans. Well, if I had to guess, I think it would be Texans, Colts as the 2 teams representing from the AFC South. I don't know if the Jaguars are going to make it. They have not a very easy schedule remaining, and the Colts and Texans are both hotter than the Jaguars right now. So keep an eye out for that kind of matchup in the AFC South. We'll see you guys again later. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I have t-shirts dropping very, very soon. So look out for those as well. Maybe you guys want to cop some new The Camper Report merch. Until next time, guys, stay safe. And this is going to be a crazy